Hi, I'm Author Assist, proud sponsor of the 3-Act Structure Show on the Go Indie Now platform. Author Assist offers affordable services and one-on-one training to independent authors. I help them from brainstorming an idea to publishing and the promotion and marketing of the book. I have 2 podcasts, Narrations by KK and Behind the Pen. I'm the host of the radio show Author Assist on the Artist First Radio Network, and I'm also a multi-award-winning filmmaker. Love creating book trailers. I'm also a graphic designer and offer at least another 20 services that will help authors navigate and stand out. If you're a new author and you're holding the copy of your book in your hands, thinking, now what? That's when you need Author Assist. Contact me for a service sheet at kgantusauthораssist@gmail.com.
When we deconstruct the elements of story and its structure, whether you acknowledge 3 acts or not, our focus shifts to one aspect that connects us all: the characters. Since the dawn of storytelling itself, there has always been one side's hero and one side's villain. Now, where you may fall in who you support or relate to might shift, but it's always there. However, these days, it's even more layered and complicated. When we have been able to nuance and finite roles and involvement, gray the black and white. It's that examination we will be doing this season. And we'll be doing it in 3-act structure.
When a character searches their soul, the amount of ways they feel desire, the lust, the happiness, only one art can offer to be the catalyst for their motivations and deepest desires. That character arc is the love interest.
I am a fantasy, romance, paranormal, adventure author, kind of a mix of all of those put together. You can find all my work on the website. I also host shows for Go Indie Now on Tuesdays, and I do my own author interviews for my YouTube channel. But yeah, check it out. I'm excited to discuss some romance characters.
Hi, I'm Rosemary Claire Smith. I write science fiction, fantasy, horror, mystery, and romance finds its way into all of those, including in an interactive adventure game in which you get to choose your gender. And if you want to have romance with other characters, you get to choose their gender too. It's called T-Rex Time Machine.
I'm AJ Mulligan. I write dystopian sci-fi with a heavy romance, polyromance element, and I write a lot of reverse harem paranormal romance, as well as male-female, male-male. Everything with female, I write a lot of different combinations, and it's a lot of logistics to work out.
My name is Megan Morgan. I am the author of The Altered Wake, with The Altered Rise coming out later this summer. I primarily write science fiction and fantasy with strong female leads. And I dabble in just about everything else every now and then when it strikes my fancy.
Hi, I'm Adam Gaffin. I write science fiction with a lot of LGBTQ themes and characters and romances going on, popping up all over the place. So, yeah, I'm excited to be here and talk about this.
Hi, everybody. I'm Deborah Parmley. I'm a nomadic romance author coming to you from our motorhome, which we do full-time and travel around the country. So I got a travel blog that I share that with, and then I write primarily known for writing military romantic suspense, but I write in lots of different subgenres. So I write special ops heroes. So we got Delta Force, we got Marines, I've got SEALs, I've got you name it. I've probably got it. And then also a new thing, I'm writing 2 versions of my books. So I'm starting to put them out slowly in hardback, large print, sweeter versions for libraries and retirement homes, etc., etc.
Well, I'm curious right off the bat, as we've grown up and experienced life and experienced love and all that fun stuff, have we has our definition of the love interest evolved? Has your writing evolved because you keep writing more and more about the love interest? I'm curious how the evolution of the love interest has happened for you.
Well, it's definitely been a big change. I grew up thinking, I mean, I was aware of LGBT and that subsection, but I mostly just wrote male, female, and then I started writing the Abnormal series, which is a dystopian sci-fi. But I found out somewhere through the writing that my characters were bi. I was not aware of that, and poly, and I was like, okay, well, this is happening. So it's interesting to work out the logistics of different dynamics of romance and love interests, especially when you get into reverse harem and you got 3, 4, 5, however many guys, and you got to work out who's sitting where and what's happening at the moment.
I think that love interests were in a lot of ways the impetus for my writing career, because I spent a lot of time reading fantasy and sci-fi as a young person, and invariably in that genre the hero was generally speaking male and the love interest was generally speaking female, and I was perpetually furious about sort of the roles that the female love interests were very often shoehorned into in those genres. And so yeah, a lot of my writing, I'm very intentionally subverting the expectations of what is a love interest and what can their arc be. And I think that as time is passing, we're sort of getting like more interesting ideas of what love interest can be and the role that they can play in the story. We're not totally past the days of the girlfriend getting fridged. But I think we're kind of slowly getting there and acknowledging how much those kinds of things used to happen.
Yeah, like Megan, I think a lot of my early days in terms of reading science fiction, I also was perpetually furious, and also watching a lot of science fiction where the love interest was the prize that the male hero was entitled to after he always went through all of this stuff and saved the world, and then she just fell into his arms. And man, we have come such a long way. I had to have a male protagonist because I didn't really realize that I could do anything but have a male protagonist if I was going to be writing for Analog Magazine. And there was a woman, but it ended up being a tragic story where she did not end up with him, and that to me seemed the height of daring. And when I look at over the years how far things have come, when I was writing my game, one of the requirements of gaming companies, since it is all words only, you get to choose your gender and you get to choose the gender of other characters, and as a player, and you get to decide whether in the game you want to have a romance with other characters or not. And so when I was writing that, I had to always be thinking, does this work for two men? Does this work for two women? If this character is one, if this character is another. It was really a stretch in a very good way to try to write romance so that it would work regardless of gender.
So my characters, when I started writing, I focused more on like kind of not so much as the male coming in to save the female, but the female actually saves the male in my first series more often than not. And I totally took the whole idea of the reverse harem stuff and kind of ran with it. It started out small kind of in my first series, but in this new series I'm writing, I'm incorporating more of it and kind of broadening out like the different types of romances there are out there, because that's something I felt like was kept out of like reach for me growing up, and it's been something I've found fascinating and really enjoyed. So
when I was growing up and reading science fiction, it was a lot of Asimov and Heinlein, and Asimov was the very traditional. Heinlein, for all and we could do a whole show on his faults. He did knock down, or at least punch holes in, a bunch of relationship stereotypes, and then Spider Robinson later picked up a lot of those, and I enjoyed Spider Robinson's writings. So when I started writing my first big novel, it opens with a scene with two women and one man getting married, and it was just like, oh, okay, and it went from there.
So I'm coming from the romance genre, of course, and you'd think that would be easier. But what I've seen from when I first even started reading romance and fantasy and sci-fi back in high school is that the love interests weren't like real people at all. They were more like a caricature. So you had Fabio with the flowing hair, right? And the big muscles. And we still do the big muscle thing because that's sexy. But we're not so much about the caricature anymore. And I would see that also within the sci-fi. The love interest, she's got to be hot. She's got to have, big tatas and, she's got to wear a bikini or whatever. And like, she's not like people you would meet today. And I think what we've got more now in both genres is a willingness to let more varied characters out there and have them be more human and less like a caricature. As far as me personally, I did start out writing the typical, well, not typical, because I thought I was writing a Western. So it was very Western when it turned into romance. But I still had they're attracted. Well, of course, that's how the biology for us works, So, but that was so much a part of, the newer, the books I was writing in the beginning. And now, well, yes, they're attracted. They don't have to be so much like a caricature. I've got one guy, one hero, he's a Marine with an eye patch. He's got PTSD. He's certainly not a caricature. He's more like a real person. And so we've come a long way.
So that being said, with the growth of romance or the growth of the love interest and giving them a definition and changing it, subverting it, and everything, there is still the way we fall in love universally, or the way that love happens universally. And so I'm kind of curious if how organic it is for you in your process. Or is it something that you think about? Is it something that you develop? Is it something that surprises you?
I always find that if I've developed really strong characters, then those kinds of things, like maybe I'll have an idea in my mind of, two characters having that kind of a relationship, but it's almost like they kind of have to also be willing to sort of like fulfill that role. Also, at the same time, I think that as certainly like when you're in your 20s, like your idea of what a romance is very different from what your idea of romance is, I think, when you're in your 30s and you're like a single mom with 2 kids. And I think that, how you expect that relationship to impact your main character, I think it changes and deepens. And I think that what I'm always looking for in that interaction is how much is there a push for growth. And I think that's why you see so much of the trope of like manic pixie dream girl, like fulfilling that role because, she's wild and fun and crazy, but not dangerous. So she's just uncomfortable enough to force the lead character to kind of like question how he's living his life in a funny way without it being like too much. So even if you don't want to write that kind of a character because it's very tropey, or like maybe you do, that's fine also. But if you're trying to avoid that, you're just sort of looking for that, like it's a similar dynamic, I think, sometimes to what you have with the antagonist, because you want that character to force your main character to grow. But I think the question is like how much, and how well does that then also translate into like, a love sort of love narrative.
With every single one of my novels and the longest of my novellas, the relationships, with the exception of the very first one, the one that kicked everything off, every single relationship that is developed in there has been a surprise to me as I've been writing it. Not a plotter, a pantser, but to me, that actually makes it a bit more realistic because that's the way life is. I mean, we don't go through life and going, okay, I'm such and such an age. Now I'm going to go find somebody and fall in love. It happens when it happens, and it happens with who it happens with. And, circumstances be damned. And then once it starts happening, then I can tweak it a little bit to, accentuate what I want to bring up, what I want to play with. But the existence of the relationships, the existence of the love interests, totally takes me by surprise. Now the short stories have been different. There has been a plan for those because I don't have as many words to work with. There is definitely okay, I know where I'm going with this shorter story. So in those, it doesn't surprise me.
So I'm going to use my character Ember, for example. Sorry. So I knew that she was going to end up with these certain people. Didn't know how exactly it was going to happen. I had an idea, had wrote down an idea, and it took a completely different turn that I was not expecting. Because instead of having her meet like the very first mate that she has later on, she actually met him earlier, which ended up setting up the scene for one of the big fight scenes. But like the other characters that have become her mates in there, because it is a reverse harem, there's 3 of them. It's kind of just happened just like in a surprisingly kind of situation, because it definitely did not go how I had planned it. So
when I was writing Abnormal, the character was originally bi, but kind of does whatever she wants kind of girl. And then she meets a guy and is interested in him. I'm like, okay, we got the romance going. And then like later on, another character showed up just like that, and she was like, oh hey, and I'm like, okay, we're going there. All right.
Yep. Yeah.
They can surprise you. I got invited to write this. There's 50 books set, different authors, a different state for each one. Mail order bride story, right? Well, your typical mail order bride story, they sent away for the bride, whatever. Mine turned out very different. So she gets on this train. On the train, she's almost abducted by white slavers. The Pinkerton guy on the train that she meets, they're got the sparks, right? That she gets to the town to meet the guy she's supposed to marry, and does marry him, and then he tries to have her killed. Then the Pinkerton guy is back in town, and so it's like, okay, I thought I was just invited to write this sweet mail order bride story, but the thing is, when I'm writing, because I'm a pantser, characters will come in. Now I've got new story people to deal with. I'm like, okay, why are you here? What are we doing here? It's totally different from what I thought it would be, and it's organic. So for me, I can plan, and I can have the biggest plan ever, but that's not how it's going to end up. So I quit trying to plan so much. But what I have done in the past, and it's just knowledge that I have in here now, because I've been at this for a little while. Romance authors, some of us do something kind of interesting. There are all kinds of studies out there about attraction. So let's just take a bar scene, for instance. You've got a bunch of people in there, and they've got eye contact going on. There can be a whole scene written about just the eye contact going on. Then you've got body language, like if someone's getting ready to leave a room, they'll angle away toward that doorway before they go that way. And when it's attraction, it's got its own body language to it. It's very fascinating if you ever want to delve into that. But learning that stuff has helped me to write more organically when I'm writing attraction scenes, because I have all that back here to draw from.
I plot things out. I'm very much a planner. And I should say too that the romance is, while it's in the stories, it's not front and center. It's the science fiction ideas or the fantasy ideas that are really the main driver of the story. And as far as the romance part of it goes, it can surprise me too, even though I do plan things out. And I like to mix things up, not start the romance with, okay, they gotta meet by page whatever. I should say too that I'm much more in the short fiction camp than in the full-length novel camp. So I like to have things where it's these are already a couple and something is happening, and what is that going to be doing to their romance, and can it survive whatever is going on with them in the rest of their life. For example, I can't hold it up, but my story Etruscan Afterlife, which is in the Reinvented Heart, is a wonderful anthology looking at romance and all sorts of relationships in the distant future. And mine is about a couple that are thinking about uploading themselves into some sort of computer technology as a way to avoid death. And so the question is, what's that going to do to their relationship? Because we're not just our rational brains, we're all of our biochemistry as well. And what my characters want to know is, are we still going to love each other after we've been uploaded?
This day and age, expand upon the love interest. Do you ever get stuck with that? Do you feel like sometimes you've gone too far with that idea that love is a little bit more simpler than we make it sometimes? I mean, does it feel like there's too much subversion of this of the actual character arc, or do you feel like there's not enough? Where are you with where the love interest is at this present time in terms of how it represents itself in the story?
As long as it's advancing the plot and advancing the character development, then you're okay. If you get to the point where it's not doing anything for the character and it's pulling on the plot, if it's slowing it down, because like Rosemary, I write science fiction, and that's the main focus. The relationships are happening to my characters, as they go through everything else that they're going through. So if the romance, the relationships are taking away from the central part of the story, okay, then maybe I've gone too far with them. But as long as it's moving the story forward, then run with it.
I think the only point where you get into trouble is when it no longer feels like a relationship and it's no longer pulling something interesting out of the protagonist. You see this in a lot of very early video games where, like, Princess Peach and Mario, and Princess Peach is literally just like, a trophy basically for Mario to go get. And I think that's how a lot of romance felt for a long time. So I will actually 100% take this era of like pushing boundaries. Number one, a broader range of this, kind of character, a broader range of like gender dynamics and sex dynamics, and also a broader, deeper range of character where maybe we're getting away from some of those tropes and getting into like realistic relationships. I think that this is definitely one of the areas where storytelling has needed to change and advance for like a very long time, and I feel like that's finally happening, and I'm very much here for it.
I'm very much, very much here for it too, and storytelling needing to change so that it's not just the hero is refusing the call and then the villain does something terrible to the hero's girlfriend, and so then there's all that revenge motivation going on, and the girlfriend is there only to provide motivation. Thank goodness we've gotten beyond the girlfriend is the trophy prize at the end of the thing, as opposed to a person with their own agency and their own desires and strong characters. The other thing I would add sometimes that the romance can get in the way is sometimes artificial situations where there's a misunderstanding between the characters, and that's kind of a plot driver. But if these characters would just sit down and have a 2-minute conversation, everything would be cool. And the readers are going, just talk to each other, and your problems are ourselves. So sometimes the plot is really getting in the way of what would normally happen between characters like these.
Love doesn't just happen. In a lot of shifter novels, I feel like it just happens. Like, oh, here's your mate. Here, we're going to make this, like, everything's perfect. And I'm like, no, it's not, because you don't know each other. There has to be, like, a time period where you have to get to know each other. And they're like, yeah, I accept that you're my mate, kind of thing. And I feel like I explore that more in my Face Shifter series. Like, Liz is the main character of that one. She doesn't know magic and stuff exists. And she doesn't know she's a shifter and stuff yet. And she's pulled towards this guy, but she's like, I don't know if I want to go there because I know I feel a lot towards him, but this is like a lot of stuff is happening and I don't know if I'm ready for that. But I try to really make relationships like an actual thing where they have to talk. They're not the trophy kind of thing. And like, yeah. So I hope I do that.
Now, women do not want to be objects, but neither do men. I mean, it's not really talked about much, but I've gone to enough romance conventions and seen the Mr. Romance pageant to know that these cover models can be objects just like the women can be. So, I mean, it's not like anyone gets a pass on, oh, these guys do that, but these women don't. Okay, so sticking to real human characteristics that your reader can identify with is always good writing, no matter what story it is or what the character is. So the further we get away from these objects, these caricatures, the better off we are. We've got things we chat about over in romance circles, and one of them is the heroine they call too stupid to live, because she's just making choices that are, you think, really, oh my gosh, And I'll use one example, 50 Shades. She didn't have a computer to look up stuff. She's a college student. How is she passing her classes without a computer to look things up? I'm like, at the library or something. Anyway, that whole part was just like, really? Okay, I just want to throw the book away now. But that's the kind of thing that puts your reader off. The more you can pull from your life or things you see into it, the better off you are. And it's kind of a tricky thing. So I got military romantic suspense. All right, so I've got to have the military stuff's got to be right factually. Then I've got to have the suspense part going. Then I got to have the romance going. So I've really kind of got two kind of plot lines running through there, because you could look at the romance separately and you could look at the suspense part separately. And you could go one way or the other and not have the other. But there's a lot of juggling. And so to keep it from being too formulaic or too unrealistic, I think going with the human elements helps us to actually write the stories better and relate to the characters ourselves. And once we can do that, then we know that the reader can relate to them because we're relating to them.
It's a balancing act of trying to fit the tropes that the people want to read and not overly tropify it. You don't want to like have it a totally formulaic book, because that's going to be kind of boring. You got to throw in little surprises here and there, or combine tropes that normally you wouldn't see combined, because otherwise people are going to be like, oh, it's another guy who's perfect, or oh, it's another girl who is the ditzy blonde, or whatever. You gotta work with what you have, but you also gotta kind of tweak it and make it to where it's more interesting to the readers and more palatable sometimes than just your standard. This is this. Boom, here you go. I like to write stuff that kids can't read. I enjoy writing those scenes that makes my mom cringe when she's editing. Not because of the writing, but because of what she's having to read and edit. I actually sent her my next book is a monster romance. It's a reverse harem. There's tentacles and tails and all kinds of stuff in there. And I was like, yeah, Mom, sorry for the tentacle porn. And she's like, thanks for your dub, So
I love it though, like, because it's gonna be good.
That needs to go in your marketing.
Yeah, right.
It's actually going to be in the dedication, Actually, there's a note to my mom in the dedication. Sorry for the tentacle porn. And I was like, well, mostly sorry.
you.